Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. So for this video lecture, we're going to talk about chapter 9 or the process of evolution. This is your first reporter, Nurshaima Macauyag, and I will be focusing on the evidence of evolution. But first, what is evolution? Actually, evolution refers to the change in population of organisms over time. Lahat ng species actually including humans, they evolved from earlier species, and until today they are still continuing to evolve. And this continuous evolution over many generations, it actually result in the development of new varieties and species katulad ng mga GMO, GMF or genetically modified foods, the breeding of dogs, and the breeding of uh, cats. So, uh, ano nga ba nasabi ng mga scientists that evolution really exists, that evolution is actually taking place. So, actually, they have numerous evidences na nagpapakita na meron talagang evolution, that evolution really exists. Katulad na lang ng fossil record of change in earlier species, homologies, DNA and protein, the chemical and anatomical similarities or related life forms, the geographic distribution of related species, and the recorded genetic changes in living organisms over many generations. So first up, yung fossil record. So, alam naman natin what a fossil is. A fossil, mapa-imprint man yan or petrified, it is the remains of animals and plants that is found in sedimentary rock deposits na nagbibigay sa atin ng record na meron talagang pagbabago through the vast periods of time. It is actually referred to as some of the greatest evidence na nagpapatunay na merong evolution. Kasi it tells that the species from the past is very different from what they are today. And this evidence, nagpapatunay ito na there has been a tremendous variety of living things. Next is yung homology or it refers to the similar structure that evolved from the same ancestral body pero magkaiba yung function. So example na lang is yung four limbs ng vertebrates like yung hand ng human, yung forelimb ng cat, yung flippers ng whale, at saka uh, yung wings ng bat. So, they have derived from the same tetrabed structure. They have the same structure. Pero magkakaiba sila ng function. Like in humans, we use that for gripping things, holding things. And in cat, they use that to walk. And in whales, they use that to swim. And in bats, they use that to fly. Next is yung genetics, or where the simplest and most powerful evidence is provided by the phylogenetic reconstruction. So, yung pag-arrange nila ng mga groups, ng mga organisms kung saan sila nabibilong, kung anong family ba sila, anong gender sila na bibilong, it enable us to recapitulate yung relationship na na-establish through the morphological and biochemical studies na nag-connect sa atin na meron talagang connection yung every species that is existing. So next is yung DNA sequencing, where the comparison of the DNA sequence, it allows organisms to be grouped by sequence similarity. So, hindi lang yung sa phylogenetic trees, through yung DNA sequencing din, where merong kapare-parehas na DNA ay sequences yung mga DNA nila, and then they are grouped accordingly. And makikita talaga na may relationship talaga yung bawat organisms. And then, as the ability to sequence the nucleotides making up the DNA has improved, naging possible din yung paggamit ng genes to reconstruct the evolutionary history of organisms. So, dahil sa mutation, yung sequence ng nucleotides in a gene, it gradually change over time. So, the more closely related yung dalawang organisms, the less their DNA will be. So, because there are tens of thousands of genes in humans and other organisms, yung DNA na nagko-contain uh, sa isang organism, it consists of a tremendous amount of information about yung sa evolutionary history of each group. So, next is proteins. So, the proteomic evidence, it also supports yung sa universal ancestry of life. So, according to it, there are vital proteins such as yung ribosomes, DNA polymerase, at saka yung RNA polymerase na nahahanap in everything from the most primitive bacteria to the most complex mammals. So, the core part of the protein is, nakakonserve ito throughout the lineages of life na nagsiserve ng similar function. So, higher organisms, it have evolved additional protein subunits na nag-affect sa regulation and protein-to-protein interaction of the core. So, other arching similarities between all lineages of extant organisms such as yung DNA, RNA, amino acids, at saka yung lipid bilayer, it gives support to the theory of common descent. So, yung sa phylogenetic analysis of protein sequences from various organisms, it produces similar trees ng relationship between all organisms. So, yung chirality ng DNA, RNA, and amino acids is conserved across all known life. So, dahil nga there is no functional advantage to right or left-handed molecular chirality, yung simplest hypothesis is yung choice that was made randomly by early organisms is nabapasa siya on all to all the extant life through common descent. So, yung further evidence for constructing ancestral lineages comes from junk food. For example, is yung pseudogenes or yung dead genes that steadily accumulate mutation. Next is yung evolutionary developmental biology and embryonic development. So, uh, according to this, there has been a uh, evolution in the embryonic development of every organisms na nakapagsasabi na that proves na meron talagang uh, connection yung mga ancestors ng different organisms na to. So, evolutionary developmental biology is yung biological field that compares the developmental processes of different organisms to determine ancestral relationship between species. So, there are a large variety of organism genome. It contain a small fraction of genes na nagko-control sa organisms development. So, example na lang is yung embryo ng fish, turtle, salamander, and human. As we can see, they have the same embryo. Pero paglaki nila, they are not the same organisms. So, for example lang din is yung sa fish and sa humans, yung embryo nila have gills. And sa fish, when naging fully developed organism na to, yung gills na to, nade-develop siya to help it breathe underwater. Pero sa humans, yung gills na to, it eventually fades away pag naging fully developed organism na siya. So, next is yung sa chemical and anatomical similarities. So, actually, all living things on Earth, they are fundamentally similar in the way na yung basic anatomical structures develop and the same way din in their chemical compositions. So, kahit ano pa yan, simple single-celled protozoa or highly complex organisms, they are all begin as single cells na that reproduce themselves by similar division process. It's always either mitosis or meiosis or both. So, lahat din yan sila after a limited lifespan. They also grow old and eventually die. So, all the living things on Earth, actually, they share the ability to create complex molecules out of carbon and a few other elements. So, in fact nga, 99% of the proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and other molecules of living things are made from only 6 of the 92 most common elements. So, this is not just a mere coincidence. So, lahat talaga ng plants and animals, they receive their specific characteristics nga from their biological parents. Kasi nga, namamana nila to from the particular combinations of genes. So, that's why molecular biologists, they have discovered that genes are in fact segments of DNA in our cells. So, itong segments ng DNA na to, it contain chemically coded recipes na gumagawa ng proteins by linking together yung particular amino acids in specific sequence. So, all of the tens of thousands of types of proteins in living things, they are mostly made of only 20 kinds of amino acids. Example na lang is yung mga alanine, methionine, ganon. I don't remember all of it, pero those are just some of the amino acids that I remember. And every combination, it actually uh, refers to a specific characteristic of a person. So, di ba, it's very unique. And despite the great diversity of life on our planet, yung simple language ng DNA code is actually the same for all living things. Yung way na pag-code ng bawat genes, it's actually the same in living for all living things. So, ito yung evidence na ng molecular unity of life. So, in addition to that then, most living things are alike na they all get their energy needed for growth, repair, and reproduction directly from the sunlight by photosynthesis nga. Or sometimes, like as humans, they get it indirectly by eating foods na by eating foods or plants na ginagamit yung sunlight para mabuhay. Ganon. So, many groups of species there, they share the same types of body structures kasi nga they inherited it from a common ancestor that had them. So this is the case with the vertebrates, also yung diniscuss ko kanina. And all of these major chemical and anatomical similarities between living things, it can be most logically accounted for by assuming that nag-share sila ng common ancestor or they come into existence as a result of similar natural processes. So, itong facts na to, it make it difficult to accept a theory of special and independent creation of different species. So, next is yung geographic distribution of related species. So, this is another clue to the patterns of past evolution that is found in a natural geographic distribution of related species. So, it is clear na yung major isolated areas and yung island groups na often nag-evolve on their own distinct planets and animal communities. So, example na lang is yung before humans arrived, 60 to 40,000 years ago, Australia, meron silang 100 species of kangaroos, koalas, and other marsupials. Pero, none of that have more advanced terrestrial placental mammals such as yung dogs, cats, bears, and horses. So, itong mga land mammals na to, they're actually more absent sa mga more isolated islands like yung Hawaii and sa New Zealand. So, each of these places na to, they had a great number of plant, insect, and bird species kahit na wala silang mga placental mammals. So, ito ring mga ano na to, mga plant, insect na and bird species na to na nahanap sa mga isolated lands na to, they are also very unique na wala kang mahahanap na ibang organisms na ganun aside from those places. So, it actually shows the unique biotic environments the life forms in these areas have been evolving in isolating from the rest of the world for millions of years. Genetic changes over generations. So, we all know naman that yung Earth's environments, it is actually constantly changing. So, usually in subtle and complex ways. So, itong changes na to, sometimes they're so great as to go beyond yung makakaya ng mga organisms. That's why nagkakaroon ng massive death or extinction. So, uh, pero according to Charles Darwin, not all individuals naman daw, they always perish. So, fortunately, natural populations, they have their genetic diversity. So, merong mga individuals whose characteristics na nag-aalaw sa kanila to survive in the environmental crisis that will likely to help them to survive and able them to reproduce for the next generation. So, subsequently, itong traits na to, it will be more common in the next generation. And evolution of the population will occur. So, example na lang is yung gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. So, itong purple na to, it is the gram-negative bacteria. And on the other side, this violet blue something petri dish. This is it is composed of gram-positive bacteria. So, example lang, in a petri dish in a laboratory to prove that there is an evolution, pag napatakad na those petri dishes, merong mga bacteria dyan, mga certain bacteria. So, pag binatakan sila ng lethal antivirus, and they're tested, and the petri dish turn purple, it means that merong evolution na nangyari. It means that yung bacteria, they're immune from that antibacterial kasi they have inherited that from their ancestor. While ito naman, sa isang side, the bacterias, the petri dish have turned violet kasi they're not strong enough uh, to thrive, to survive. So, kung sino yung mas uh, strong, those are the one who will likely to survive and reproduce for the next generation, as I've said. So, in simple words, survival of the fittest. Next, lastly, is yung evidence from selection. So, this section is actually very interesting and unique kasi it provides an narrower context concerning the process of selection. So, all of the examples provided prior to this, it have described the evidence that evolution has occurred. So, the very common example na lang is yung resistance ng Mycobacterium tuberculosis sa antibacterial na tulad ng isoniazid and rifampicin. So that's why the doctors, when they prescribe prescribe an antibiotic, we have to strictly follow their guidelines. Like, kung sabihin doon, 3 times a day talaga ititake. Kasi, when you take it uh, nang wala sa oras or paputol-putol, bacteria, they adapt to the environment of the antibiotic. That makes them makes them adapt to that antibiotic na that makes them stronger, that makes them able to survive, and that makes us harder to kill it, to get rid of it. So another example rin is yung pag-mutate ng COVID. So actually yung COVID, because of its because of the environment, para lang makasurvive siya, it continuously evolved. So, nangyayari, nagmi-mutate yung spike niya para maka-adapt siya sa environment to be stronger and to help it uh, exist. Moving on to our next topic is the artificial selection and the experimental evolution. So, artificial selection, it demonstrates yung diversity that can exist among organisms that share a relatively recent common ancestor. So, in artificial selection, yung isang species, it is bred selectively at each generation that it only allow those organisms that exhibit desired characteristics to reproduce. So, itong mga characteristic na to, it become increasingly well-developed in successive generations. So, artificial selection is actually successful long before science discovered the genetic basis. So, example na lang is yung breeding ng dogs, genetically modified food, yung pag-breed ng flowers, cultivation of foods, and others. So, yan. Example na lang is yung wolf that has been bred with bulldog, collie, or dachshund. So, next is the experimental evolution. So, according to experimental evolution, it uses controlled experiments para mag-test ng hypotheses and theories of evolution. Example na lang is yung stickleback fish in both marine and freshwater species that has been evolving since the last ice age. So, yung freshwater stickleback fish, it survives in colder temperature. So, gitest ang mga scientists yung tolerance ng stickleback fish na marine if it can tolerate cold environment also, and it only took them 3 separate generations to evolve and match the 2.5 degrees Celsius na tolerance in cold environment. So, next is yung evolution of man. So, this is actually very controversial kasi according to it, according to it, even man is actually a product of the evolution. And the hard part here is that uh, uh, most of us misunderstood its concepts. So we all thought that humans evolved from chimpanzees and monkeys. So actually, hindi yun yung sinasabi niya. According to it, chimpanzees, gorillas, and humans, they have the common ancestor. They share the common ancestor. It's not that humans evolved from monkeys. It's that they have the common ancestor. So, father of evolution, Charles Darwin. So, he actually authored The Origin of Species in 1859. So, this discovery was because of his exploration in Galapagos Islands in 1859. And itong theory na to, it concerns that evolution of man proposes that humans and apes derived from an ape-like ancestor that lived on Earth a few million years ago. So, humans did not evolve from monkeys. They just shared the common ancestors. Yun po yung sinasabi ng evolution of man. First is yung Australopithecus afarensis. So, they are the first hominids that have lived in Africa, and they are relatively short, they're stocky, and they also walk upright like humans. Next is yung Homo habilis, or yung oldest member of the genus Homo, and they are the first Homo of the genus na nag-evolve from Australopithecus afarensis more than 2 million years ago. So, in the early 1960s, maraming nahanap na hominid bones. and beside it is scattered stone tools that believe that is made believe na they use stone tools during their time. That's why they're called the Homo habilis, that translates to um, handyman. So, uh, their characteristic is that they are 1.2 meter tall or 4 feet tall. They lived in Africa 5 million years ago and then eventually become extinct. Next is yung Homo erectus or yung first hominid na umalis ng Africa. So, yung first fossil nila is nahanap sa Java, an island in Southeast Asia. That's why they're used to be called as the Java man. So, their structure is that they walk upright and then their height is about 1.5 meter or 5 feet, and they also have large brain that is about 1000 cubic centimeter or 60 cubic inches, and then it is believed that they also use crude tools and fire. So a complete 1.5 million year old Homo erectus cranium na discover siya in East Africa in 1967, na pinaniniwala ang yung Homo erectus daw is have lived in Africa and then nag-migrate siya sa Asia and Europe, that it hunted large animals using flint and bone tools, and eventually they have disappeared about 2 million years ago as early humans emerged. So next is yung new Homo neanderthalis, or Homo neanderthalis, or yung Homo sapiens neanderthalis. So they are present in Europe and Asia between 13 million years ago and 30 million years ago. So in 856, yung fossil record nila is nahanap in Neander Valley in Germany. That's why they are called the Homo neanderthalis. So they're almost the same as the modern humans, pero kaibahan lang nila is that they are more heavily built than modern humans, and they had the same brain capacity, and they also stood erect when walking. Pero they're not identical nga kasi they're because of their bone structure. So yung bone structure nila is very similar, pero they have heavier brows and smaller chin. And they also move from place to place in search of food. And also they are experts in controlling fire. And they are also believed to have a religion kasi they know how to bury their dead, and they use herbs, and they use animal bones in grave patterns also. And they also use they have also used art. Next is yung Homo sapiens sapiens. So about 34,000 years ago, yung Homo neanderthalis were replaced by Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens, they have first evolved in Africa and then nag-migrate sila sa Europe and Asia. So they have actually complex culture, and they have more advanced tools, and they also know how to do artworks. Next is yung Homo sapiens sapiens, or translates to wisest of the wisest, kasi they're the most superior in language ability. Parehas lang sila ng Homo sapiens, pero more superior yung language ability nila. They know how to communicate, and they work together also to survive, and they also speak to one another, and they know one's existence. That's why they're called the wisest of the wisest. And they still evolve today because Homo sapiens sapiens are us. So that's all for my report. Thank you for watching.